In this podcast episode, we want to introduce you to our BCEN friend, Lynn Miller Hayward. Come along as Michael Dexter and Holly Briggs talk with Lynn about her deep-rooted career in nursing, grown over the past 40 years. Lynn is sure to inspire and impart some wisdom she's learned along the way. This episode is called No Wasted Time.
Hello, and welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast, where we hold interesting conversations about learning with a range of thought leaders, BCEN certification holders, and industry professionals. But most importantly, to create value and insight for you, our professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. We hope you find our discussions interesting, informative, sometimes funny, sometimes serious, and always valuable. I'm Holly Briggs, a professional development specialist at BCEN, and one of your hosts for today. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Dexter, Director of Professional Development at BCEN. Hi, Michael.
Hello, Holly.
Great to have you with us. And in this episode of BCEN and Friends, we have Lynn Miller Hayward. Lynn has been serving communities in the U.S. and South Africa throughout her 4 decades in nursing. Her kind heart and keen mind are an asset to nursing, and I can't wait for us to get to know her better. Michael, could you please introduce us to our BCEN friend, Lynn?
Yeah, I would be happy to. Lynn was born in South Africa and started her nursing career by obtaining a Bachelor of Social Sciences as a registered nursing and midwife in 1979. She moved to the U.S. shortly after graduating and spent 3 years in the U.S. healthcare before returning to South Africa. With her experience in emergency services, it lit a fire for Lynn to become an Advance Life Support Paramedic and take the flight world for several years. She also became an AHA instructor for community education. And from a cruise ship nurse to a freestanding ED in North Carolina, Lynn's career has moved in many different specialties of nursing. But as she will tell you, gaining her CEN made her feel recognized and respected in the field of emergency nursing. Lynn returned stateside in 2023 and is trying something new in the field of endoscopy, as she believes there's always something to learn. We recently met Lynn at a BCEN Learn Live conference, and Lynn, welcome to the BCEN and Friends podcast. It's a pleasure to meet with you again and have you with us today.
Thank you so much. It's my privilege to be here.
Well, we're really excited to talk to you more about nursing and, international nursing, the different perspectives that you've had. But if you could just talk to us a little bit more about your nursing education and maybe what got you into a career in nursing and the nursing program format there in South Africa.
Okay, well, it is very different from your format here in the States, that I do know. I was going to be a nurse. That's all I wanted to be since I was 5 years old. There was no plan B. And I was going to do just the regular 3-year diploma in nursing course that they do over there. But I was challenged by a mentor in my gap year after high school to apply for the 4.5-year intensive bachelor program. It was kind of an elite program. And so I applied for it. I had never even thought about that before. And it was so worthwhile doing. There were only 22 who were accepted to do that degree, and 12 completed it. So it was a small but a very cohesive group. We did our full courses at the university, and then we would come home, like after a full day in lectures at the university, we'd come home and then get onto the floors and do several hours of clinical hours. So that's why it was such an intensive program. There was very little downtime because we were both on campus as regular students in the university, coming back to the hospital setting and then doing our clinical hours. So when all our university friends were having wonderful holidays on the beaches, just the nursing students were doing all their clinical hours on the floors. But it was a challenging course. For example, our first year anatomy lectures, the degree nurses paired with the medical students, and one nurse, one doctor to a cadaver. And we did not just book learning of anatomy, we were doing it on cadavers, which was actually a very fascinating and diving much deeper program. And one thing that is different in South Africa degrees is that you go into the university and you don't have to do any electives like you have to do here. You dive right into the track you've chosen.
It sounds like You kind of cut through some of the fluff that is in certain programs here, and you get right into the heart of whatever program you've decided to go into. And I think it's really interesting to me that you would be paired with medical students and that you would get that hands-on experience. There's so much investment in medical school towards making access to things like cadavers, which are great learning environments. As a nurse, going through nursing school, that wasn't part of our nursing program. However, I've done cadaver labs since then on my own, and I've really learned so much. And so just to have that be part of the curriculum is a great asset. I know simulation has become a huge part of nursing education now, but really getting those hands-on and partnering with other programs, because we're going to all kind of be together taking care of patients. So that's very interesting. After coming to the US, Lynn, for a few years and then returning to South Africa, you decided to train for flight nursing and to get your paramedic license. What kind of was the greatest challenge of taking on that new role?
Well, it certainly changed the trajectory of where I was going. I was just always going to be a nurse. But on my first day in the United States, I was working in Pennsylvania. On my very first day that I was allowed to work in ER as a nurse, they sent me into the field with the Advance Life Support Unit for any calls that might come through, just so I could see what happened pre-hospital. And we didn't have any calls until lunchtime. We got a call for an electrocution, and we responded thinking someone got a bit of a shock. We got on scene in a small town, right around the town square, and there were 6 young adult men, ages 23 to 29, in full cardiac arrest. Some men had been sandblasting a church in the center of town, middle of winter, and the electricity had arced from the overhead power lines onto the metal ladder. And by the time we got on scene, there were 6 men down because they went to help the 2 who had been electrocuted on the ladder. And there was no contact. They didn't know what had happened. And one by one, the fire guys who were off duty, who came to respond, they were all in full cardiac arrest. And we responded, and I was so impressed with the Advanced Life Support Paramedics that took charge of that scene. I didn't have to have a clue what to do without plug-in oxygen, plug-in suction. And I just said to one of the paramedics, tell me what I can do to help. And he said, draw my drugs up, which I did. But I decided I never wanted to be in the pre-hospital field again and not be able to use my nursing skills to help the patients. I didn't have a clue what to do. That's what generated my interest in going into the pre-hospital field. Once I got into that, I thrived. You asked about the greatest challenge of a new role as a paramedic, as opposed to being in nursing. Well, I went from working in a secure, controlled hospital environment where there are extra supplies, extra equipment, wall oxygen and suction availability, any extras you needed, there were always equipment rooms, to working outside of the safety net of the hospital. And it meant working in an uncontrolled, often chaotic environment, securing scene safety, crowd control, triaging, calling the advanced rescue personnel or the K9 unit, whatever you needed. You had to be decisive and confident to be able to manage those scenes until extra help could arrive, and you could take over the assessment of the patients and managing the patients. What I really appreciated about being in the field was the independence. You were an independent practitioner with a lot of autonomy because you were out there on your own. You had to have excellent clinical skills and patient assessment and management, and know your protocols well, choose the direction of patient care you were going to go with, use your critical thinking. And so I had to become a much more confident, independent, decisive person in the field. But amongst all that, I was always aware that in the middle of the chaos, it was so important to develop a relationship with the patient and the family members involved, because you were in their most vulnerable situation they'd probably ever be in their life. And that whole kind connection was huge in both nursing and out there in this chaotic world chaotic and exciting world. I loved it. It was very different to my nursing career up to that point. But the combination of being trained in both worlds has been such an asset to me over these years. It has opened up so many opportunities, and I've loved that combination.
Well, that is an amazing story. I think I could ask you more stories. I'm sure you've seen a lot and so many things that you could share and lessons that you've learned. And thank you for sharing that one, Lynn. And as you moved further in your career of nursing in general, no matter if it was pre-hospital or in a facility, what made you start getting more focused on community education and teaching CPR, teaching basic life support? What drove you to get involved in that part of it?
Well, that could be from one incident, well, not from one incident, from multiple incidents, but particularly one story. I did so many near drownings. We lived on the ocean in Durban. The city was on the ocean, but there were a lot of private pools as well. And I did drowning after drowning after drowning. And one little boy was 8 years old. My response time from the center of the city to the suburb where the drowning took place in his home pool took me 17 minutes to get on scene. I was responding at the peak hour of homegoing traffic in the afternoon. I was driving with two wheels on the median and lights and sirens, and the traffic did as best as they could, but it took me 17 minutes. And I got on scene, and there just happened to be a young Roman Catholic priest who was visiting a parishioner, an 8-year-old parishioner next door. He heard the mom screaming. He jumped over a 6-foot wall. And I remember arriving on scene, and here was this young man. He must have been about 29 or 30, in blue jeans and a white shirt. And he was doing CPR on this little boy. And I said, "You are doing fantastic CPR. Keep going," while I set up my monitor, my intubation equipment, get lines run. And he continued CPR. By the end of that case, we were ventilating the little boy. We had done our Advance Life Support drug protocols. We got a rhythm back. I continued ventilating him, and we proceeded to hospital. And I remember saying to that young priest, I said, "I don't know where you learned to do CPR, but it is not me that saved this child. It was you who saved this child. Those basic skills are the only things that kept him alive enough for us to work with when I got there." And it was so impressionable on me that that's when I dived into becoming a CPR instructor, because I'd seen that same pattern over and over again. If there was someone on scene who knew how to do CPR, we had something to work with when we arrived with all our extra advanced life support equipment. And I became convinced that it was the basic life support skills that actually save the lives, not all our fancy extras. And yes, I became very passionate about teaching CPR in the community, because that's where people are when someone collapses. It's your moms, your grannies, your boyfriends. It's your normal people who need to know the skills of how to keep the heart and the brain alive until we get there.
You touched on such a great point. We can talk about advanced life support. We can talk about the things that we can do once we have medications and different procedures that we can do and to help promote life support at a much higher level. But if we can't get those items to the patient in a timely manner, then it really is CPR, that hands-only CPR training, that basic life support training that really has to bridge that gap. And I think that you focusing in on that and realizing they are going to be the hands until I can get there, and investing back in that, creating more community first responders, those who can do CPR while you're trying to get to them. It's so forward thinking. I am just impressed that you saw the need and you were like, I am going to be a part of putting more knowledge into our community. So thank you for that. We met you in person recently, as Michael had mentioned, at BCEN Learn Live in Charlotte. It was great to meet you. And you talked to me about how you got your CEN and you're maintaining your CEN. But my question is, you were a nurse for many years and very skilled, very knowledgeable. You had all of this training, all of these different things that you've done. Why did you get your CEN? And then why do you feel that it's important to keep it up?
When I arrived in America, I came over having been in different facets of care, from being a nurse in a hospital environment to being an advanced life support paramedic out doing flights and on the road units, to working on the cruise lines, all different areas, and needing to learn how to work in those different spaces. I arrived in the States and I was totally unknown. And my degree and my background work didn't translate into the American emergency room. I didn't know how to bring it here because I was so used to working in the metric system with temperatures centigrade instead of Fahrenheit, with the drugs being named different names. Your Versed is my Dormicum. And I had to learn how to put that all together and work in America. But then I also wanted to hold a certification that was recognized in America and respected in America in my field, which was the emergency room. I loved working in that freestanding 16-bed emergency room in Charlotte. I had great leadership who were supportive and learned to work with me and taught me how to work through the system and be comfortable in the fit there. But I'm a lifelong learner. I think anybody who allows himself to become complacent and comfortable in one situation, they can continue learning if they choose to learn. The purpose was to do better, to become more excellent with better knowledge for my patient care, but also to hold a certification that others understood.
Lynn, I appreciate your thoughts on that. And I think it's really important. I feel very strongly about this, that wherever we work, whether it's an emergency nurse or an oncology nurse or med-surg nurse, that they become certified in their specialty and that they really put their heart into becoming an expert in their field and maintaining that continuing education. And so I appreciate your comments on that. And you had talked about really relating to the individual, especially when you were mentioning your paramedic time. And you've worked in so many areas. You've become certified in the US. You maintain certifications and specialty training over in South Africa. But if you had to sum up nursing itself and what nursing means, what's really important in nursing, what would you tell a newer nurse starting out that the heart of nursing and the real focus of nursing should be?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's a good question, because it's quite hard at times to be able to use the heart of nursing because we've become so technically oriented and the connection with the patient is so lost. So one of the things I say to new nurses when we work together is that connection with the patient, to allow them to feel seen and heard, to listen to what they tell you, and to care for them in a kind and personal way. We nurses are busy, especially in the emergency room. We can be extremely busy, but there is always a choice to be kind. And these people are in such a vulnerable space. They're not there because they want to be there particularly. They're there because they need to be there. They are frightened and traumatized. So one of my things I will always say to the nurses is connect with them personally and develop a relationship while you're starting an IV, while you're hanging IV antibiotics. Connect with them with a calm presence. Patients often mention my calm demeanor helped them feel so much better because they felt they were in hands that were confident and could handle the situation. Well, it didn't mean I felt calm inside all the time, that's for sure. But you learn to just give them a sense that this is okay. You're going to be okay. You're in good hands. And our whole team are working on your side to get you to a better place. And I just think that's really valuable, that we maintain our skills. That's another thing, is constant learning. If you want to be excellent in your field, We have to maintain our skills, think out of the box, be alert to anything, any changes in the patient's condition. We might not be able to put our finger in it, but it's like, don't ignore this. Something has changed. Investigate that and make sure that you're not just looking at the monitors, but you're watching the patient themselves to make sure that what you're seeing on the monitor matches with what you're seeing in the bed. And so, yes, there are always changes in guidelines and protocols, evidence-based medicine and practice. And it's important to continue learning and changing your skills with those opportunities. I also miss the continuum of care. You know, I agree with HIPAA. I understand HIPAA. But what has been lost is the continuum of care that I was able to do in South Africa, where we didn't have HIPAA. We have new laws called the POPI, it's the Personal Information Protection Laws there, that are new since 2020 and are tighter than they used to be. But I used to love the continuum of care, where I would be working with a patient in the field, bringing them into the ER, follow them from the ER to the ICU, go up and visit the patient in the ICU, see whether what we did in the ER helped them in their progress, and continued through ICU to the general floors. And that you can't do anymore here. And I really miss that part of nursing, where you have developed a relationship with the patient and you can follow them through to when they're discharged.
That's another great point, Lynn. I've often heard that nursing is both an art and a science, and the science includes evidence-based practice and the things that we learn, but the art is often related to communication, collaboration, and connection. I think that there's a lot that's been lost in that. Those are really good points, that human connection is really an integral part of nursing. And you've talked about a lot of things and given some really good examples, some good stories. And one of the things that we like to ask every guest on this podcast, is there a certain person, a patient, a family member, some particular time in your nursing career that you look back and you go, that really changed the trajectory of what I was doing. That really impacted me. Is there any particular example that you'd want to share?
Well, I had the extraordinary privilege of being amongst the first wave of Advance Life Support Paramedics, trained by two exceptional trauma and emergency specialists who spearheaded the whole new chapter of providing excellent pre-hospital care for patients in my province of KwaZulu-Natal. And they held us to the highest standards of excellence and made sure we gave our patients the best possible care. They really impacted me because they went through every case that we attended, or if we stepped out of protocols, because we were out of communication in the field, we had to stand up for why we chose to manage that patient in that way. And we would have major debriefings on those kind of situations. So that was very impactful in my medical life. In my personal life, I have come from such a strong family background with a lot of love. My parents really encouraged me to pursue what I always dreamed of doing, and that was to be involved in helping people when they were in desperate situations. And my parents really supported me, and that had a huge impact in my life.
I love that you included both the professional standards that you were held to, but then also included your family who believed that you could accomplish that and supported you on all of the different avenues and roads that it takes to become a professional. It's a lot of steps in that path to get there and then to stay there. And I think that you hit on two great points. Someone believed that you could, and then someone helped you stay there and grow there and really flourish and make this career that you've talked to us about and shared with us something to be really proud of. So I love that you included them both. I get the part in our podcast to ask a few rapid fire questions. So it's going to talk to us about some of your favorites, and it's just so we can get to know you a little bit better. But if there was a career outside of healthcare that you'd like to try, what would it be?
I have no idea, because I've loved what I've done. And I just thought it would have to be people oriented. Whether I was running a coffee shop, it would have to be people oriented because I really am intentional about connecting with people. And I have deep friendships. And one of my favorite things to do with them is go out and reconnect over a cappuccino somewhere. So maybe run a coffee shop.
I think you would have a lovely coffee shop. And I feel like you would be one of those barista people who would not only make a great cup of coffee or a great cappuccino, but then also would make one for yourself and say, hey, let's sit down. Let me figure out who you are. And I think just that curiosity that you have and that desire to intentionally connect, I feel like your coffee shop would be very full.
I think she would go become trained in latte art. That's my guess. I think she would want to.
I would. Oh, yes, I would.
Ooh. So we may hear that Lynn is opening a coffee shop. We'll see. We may have to have a follow-up. Okay, I have 3 categories of your favorite. So what is your favorite book? And it can be a book that's your favorite of all time, or it can be just something that you're currently reading.
Well, I do a lot of reading, and I usually look for books that are stories of courage, whether they're fiction or nonfiction. I love something that has people moving on and improving and stories of courage. I've loved the book All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. And The Tattooist of Auschwitz was a very moving book to me by Heather Morris. And, where people were in such dire situations, but found some way to help someone else and to grow themselves. I've just read A Voice in the Wind by Francine Rivers, which is a historical novel, which was very moving. And I love detective series. So a whole range. I enjoy books.
I am right there with you. I actually just read over the last holiday, I read All the Light We Cannot See, and I really enjoyed the way that the author wrote the book, and it was just very easy to read, very descriptive, but also again, just that the courage of the characters and the reflection of how you can make a difference, even if it seems small, it actually can end up making a huge impact. I wrote down a couple of the other books as well. So I feel like you have some good recommendations. So, okay, favorite movie or TV show, or maybe it's some binge-worthy series that you feel really strongly about?
Well, I love the movie Les Miserables. I've watched that so many times. Again, stories of courage and of bravery and changing lives. That is very impactful. By Victor Hugo. I love Denzel Washington in a movie called The Man on Fire, and an old movie, The Witness, with Harrison Ford. I love that movie.
These are great movies. I believe that I've seen every single one that you talked about, and now I kind of want to go back and watch them again. So, all right, favorite musical artist?
Oh, I am musical. I played flute and guitar, and I sang a lot with my sisters. And so I love all genres. I enjoy old ones, Queen, Eagles. So I like rock music. I love Amy Grant and just all genres of music I enjoy. I don't particularly enjoy techno music, although my nephew is involved in creating techno music. I'm learning to like it, but mostly soft rock.
And I think anyone who has any musical background at all, you may have your favorites, things that you find super palatable, and then those that you find less palatable. But I feel you can at least say, like, it's not my favorite. However, I do see that there is technical aspects to it. There's creativity in there. And though it may not be my personal cup of tea that I will listen to, I can appreciate that someone is out there being creative and using their talent in maybe a genre of music that's not going to be on my playlist, but it's there. And I appreciate the creativity that goes into making music. So, okay. Last question. Yes. What is something that you do for self-care, or a hobby that's outside of healthcare that really helps you reset?
I love cycling. I did the 100-kilometer cycle race in Cape Town, South Africa, and Oh, all the training for that. I loved it. And so my husband and I do quite a lot of cycling. He also has an 1100 Honda motorcycle that we ride a lot on the Blue Ridge Parkway. And just getting that wind in your face and outdoor, I am the relaxed passenger on the back, constantly taking movies. I just love it. And yes, outdoor activities. I have been able to go back to South Africa every year since I arrived here in 2012. And because I've had family there. And one thing we always try and do is go on a safari. What you call a safari, we say going into the bush. And just being in nature where life happens as it happens. If the lion is hungry and you are able to watch them hunt down a zebra, the tragedy of that is large for someone who's a softie like I am. But it's real life. They are hunting because they're hungry. And just living in the bush, listening to the sounds of wildlife is so restoring. I would encourage anybody to do that.
That is actually on my bucket list of things that I would like to do. I have been to Africa, not South Africa yet, but I have not been on a safari, or I have not gone into the bush, as you said. And I think that is a worthy investment in my future. And I just love how you talked about getting back in nature, being outside, and how that helps you to reset, helps you to remember that life is happening all around us. So thank you for sharing that.
Lynn, I just really appreciate you talking with us today and sharing your perspective. I think you have a lot that you have been involved in, and I think you have a lot to share and to give to so many other nurses. So I appreciate you offering some advice and telling some stories and helping us to see nursing from a different light and this perspective outside of the United States alone, but the global perspective of priorities and training and treatment of patients is really fascinating. So thank you for sharing. Thank you for being with us today. And I hope that we can continue to have more discussions with you, because I'd love to learn more and pick your brain more about all these different experiences that you've had.
Thank you for your time. I really appreciated sharing that with you.
I want to take this time to thank Lynn for joining us for this episode of BCN and Friends. Thank you, Lynn, for sharing your expertise, your experiences, and your cultivated advice with us. I don't believe it was a matter of chance that we met in November of 2023 at Learn Live in Charlotte. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity to share you with others through this episode. You are a true joy and a treasure in nursing. And to all of our listeners, we hope that you will stay tuned as we continue with BCN and Friends and bring you new, meaningful content and perspectives. If you have a suggestion for an episode, please email us at bcn@bcn.org. I'm Holly Briggs, here with Michael Dexter, and on behalf of the entire BCN team, we thank and celebrate you for all that you're doing as professional nurses across the emergency spectrum. Until next time, we are out.